the towering glass doors of Sterling Heights Financial Center sighed open, a sound so subtle it was almost lost in the Platinum Lounge's hushed atmosphere of reverence. Yet every head in the room turned. It wasn't the doors themselves. They opened countless times a day, gateways for the city's elite. It was the figure standing in the doorway that captured their attention. A boy, no older than 10, stood tentatively on the threshold. His well-worn sneakers, scuffed and faded, seemed to whisper tales of countless playgrounds and hasty errands. The oversized jacket he wore engulfed his small frame, a hand-me-down that had likely kept another child warm before him. This was Ethan Price, and despite his unassuming appearance, he carried himself with a quiet dignity, a sense of belonging that clashed starkly with his opulent surroundings. He stepped onto the polished marble, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. The air was heavy with the scent of aged leather and freshly printed money, a perfume of power and privilege. Enormous crystal chandeliers, glittering like captured constellations, hung from ceilings that soared toward the heavens. Men in bespoke suits, each worth more than a family car, clustered in discreet circles, murmuring about figures that could reshape entire neighborhoods. Women adorned in jewels that rivaled the brilliance of distant stars sipped champagne from delicate flutes, each glass costing more than a working family's weekly groceries. This was the VIP floor of Sterling Heights, a sanctuary for the ultra-wealthy, where billionaires came to multiply their fortunes, where politicians whispered secrets they dared not utter aloud, and where ordinary people like Ethan Price were never, ever meant to tread. Each step Ethan took seemed to amplify the silence, the sound bouncing off the pristine surfaces. Conversations faltered, sentences unfinished. Eyes, sharp and assessing, followed his every move, their initial confusion quickly giving way to amusement, and then something closer to disdain. A boy, a pauper, amidst this opulent temple of wealth. It was akin to watching a sparrow flutter into an eagle's nest. He reached the counter, a solid expanse of polished black granite that mirrored the chandeliers above like a dark, still lake. Behind it stood a man sculpted from money and ambition. His suit was so impeccably tailored, so utterly devoid of wrinkles, it looked as though he'd materialized into it moments before. A name tag, gleaming gold against the dark fabric, identified him as Mr. Donovan, senior account manager. His face was a mask of practiced, insincere pleasantries, a facade of warmth concealing a chilling emptiness. He had perfected the art of looking attentive while feeling absolutely nothing. Mr. Donovan glanced down at Ethan, his smile widening, yet failing to reach his eyes. "Can I help you, son?" he asked, his voice smooth, yet subtly condescending. Ethan's voice, though small, was remarkably steady, clear, and impossible to ignore. "I need to check my account balance, please." The room didn't just quiet. It became utterly silent, the kind of unnatural stillness that presages a storm. A nervous laugh rippled from behind Ethan, quickly stifled with a harsh cough. Someone whispered a word that sounded suspiciously like adorable, but carried the unmistakable sting of mockery. A woman draped in pearls, each one flawless, turned to her companion, her face alight with amusement, as if she'd just witnessed the week's most entertaining spectacle. Mr. Donovan's smile broadened, but his eyes turned glacial. "Your account balance, here?" He delivered the words as if Ethan had requested permission to park a muddy bicycle in the middle of the meticulously maintained floor. "Young man, this floor is reserved for premium clients only, high-net-worth individuals. Do you even understand what that means?" Ethan nodded, his gaze unwavering. "Yes, sir. My grandfather told me I have an account here. He said when I turned 10 I could come check it myself. He passed away 2 weeks ago." His voice wavered, a tremor of grief betraying his stoic facade. "He made me promise I'd come here, to this floor, to this counter." The word passed, hung in the air. A stone dropped into a still pond. The ripples of discomfort spread outwards, touching everyone within earshot. The laughter didn't cease entirely, but it softened, becoming strained and self-conscious. A few faces averted their gaze, unable to meet the boy's direct stare, but most remained fixated, drawn to the unfolding drama. In a place like this, vulnerability was just another form of entertainment. Mr. Donovan's expression shifted from amusement to barely concealed annoyance. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the granite counter as if preparing to explain a particularly complex concept to someone mentally deficient. Listen, kid, I don't know who your grandfather was, but this floor handles accounts with minimum balances in the millions. Millions. We're talking investments, portfolios, trust funds that could buy entire companies, not birthday money, not savings bonds, real money. Do you understand? Ethan reached into his backpack, a faded canvas bag worn and patched in 3 places, a testament to years of faithful service. He retrieved a folder, its edges frayed, yet its contents meticulously organized. The papers were protected by clear plastic sleeves, as if they were the most precious artifacts in the world. He slid the folder across the counter. I have my identification, my account number, and the authorization letter my grandfather left with his lawyer. Everything you need is right there. For a fleeting moment, something flickered across Mr. Donovan's meticulously composed face. Uncertainty, perhaps, or even a hint of curiosity. He picked up the folder as if it might bite him and flipped it open. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second, lingering on the details. Then he stopped. His face froze. Behind Ethan, a man in a charcoal suit leaned towards his companion, his voice dripping with contempt. Probably some kind of welfare account, government program for kids whose parents can't manage their own finances. I've seen it before. They open accounts with $100 and act like they're Rockefellers. The friend laughed, loud enough for Ethan to hear. Or maybe Granddad left him a savings bond from 1987. What's that worth now? $50? More laughter followed, cruel, casual laughter that flowed freely from those who had never known the weight of a $50 bill. Ethan's hands clenched into fists at his sides, but his face remained calm, betraying no emotion. He had promised his grandfather he wouldn't cry. Not here, not in front of people who wouldn't understand. Mr. Donovan was still engrossed in the documents, his finger tracing down the page, finally coming to rest on a series of numbers. His eyebrows furrowed. He flipped to the next page, then the next. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. What's the account number? He asked, his voice abruptly different, sharper, more focused. Ethan recited it from memory. Mr. Donovan typed the numbers into his computer with brisk efficiency. The screen illuminated his face in a pale blue glow. His fingers stopped abruptly on the keyboard. He stared at the screen as if it were displaying an impossible equation, something that defied the laws of reality. That's not right, he muttered, more to himself than to Ethan. He typed the numbers again, slower this time, meticulously double-checking each digit. The screen refreshed. The same information reappeared. His face drained of color. Behind him, another manager, a woman named Ms. Chun, noticed his unusual demeanor. Problem, Donovan? He didn't answer. He remained transfixed, staring at the screen. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs, but he managed to keep his voice steady. Is everything okay, sir? Mr. Donovan looked up at him, and for the first time since Ethan had walked through those doors, the man looked at him as if he were truly seeing him. Not a kid, not a joke, but a person. Where did you get this account number? Mr. Donovan asked quietly, his voice devoid of its earlier condescension. My grandfather opened it the day I was born. He told me about it when I was 8. Said it was for my future, that he'd been putting money in it since the beginning, and that when he was gone I'd understand why. The room remained still, the silence thick with anticipation. The laughter had vanished completely. Something in Mr. Donovan's face had shifted, a subtle change that the room's occupants sensed instinctively, like sharks detecting a drop of blood in the water. Ms. Chun stepped closer, peering over Mr. Donovan's shoulder at the screen. Her eyes widened in disbelief. That can't be right. Check the account again. He complied, his fingers moving mechanically. The same result appeared. She leaned in closer, squinting. Is that a decimal error? No, Mr. Donovan whispered, his voice barely audible. It's not. Ethan's stomach twisted with a knot of anxiety. Something was terribly wrong. They were scrutinizing his account as if it were broken, contaminated. "Sir, is my money gone? Did someone take it?" Mr. Donovan slowly shook his head, his gaze fixed on the screen. "No, son. Nothing's gone. It's all there." "Then what's wrong?" The manager looked at him, then back at the screen, then at the boy standing before him. "Nothing's wrong exactly. It's just that your account balance is not what we expected." "What is it?" Ethan asked, his voice barely a whisper. Mr. Donovan swallowed hard. He glanced around the room at the sea of watching faces, all the people who had laughed, who had mocked, who had assumed this boy was nothing. When he spoke, his voice carried across the entire Platinum Lounge, silencing even the faintest murmur. "Your current account balance, including accumulated interest and investment returns over the past 10 years, is $47,362,819.14. The room exploded, not with laughter this time, but with a collective gasp of shock and disbelief. The sound of shattering glass filled the air as champagne flutes slipped from nerveless fingers and crashed onto the marble floor. Someone gasped so loudly it sounded like a strangled scream. The man in the charcoal suit, the one who had cracked the welfare joke, stood frozen, his mouth hanging open like a broken door. Ethan blinked, struggling to process the incomprehensible words. "Could you say that again, please?" Mr. Donovan's hands trembled as he pointed to the screen. $47 million? You have $47 million in this account. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Ethan reached out, grasping the edge of the granite counter for support. A ringing filled his ears, and his vision blurred at the edges. 47 million. It was an impossible number, a figure plucked from the realm of fantasy. It was the kind of sum you heard about on television, the kind that belonged to other people, to movie stars and tech moguls. Not to a boy whose mother worked double shifts just to keep the lights on. Not to a boy who wore hand-me-down clothes and ate peanut butter sandwiches for dinner 3 times a week. "How?" Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible above the stunned silence. "How is that possible?" Miss Chun was already typing frantically on her own computer, summoning records, transaction histories, investment portfolios. According to this, the account was opened with an initial deposit of $50,000. Then your grandfather made consistent monthly deposits, ranging from $500 to $2,000, for 10 years straight. But that's not what fueled this growth. "What did?" Ethan asked, his voice sounding distant and unreal. She looked at him, her eyes filled with something akin to awe. "Your grandfather, he invested it. Stocks, bonds, real estate funds, tech companies right before they exploded. Every single investment he made for you, it hit. Some of these returns are 30, 40 times the original investment. It's like he knew exactly where to put every dollar. I've never seen anything like this." Mr. Donovan remained rooted to the spot, his gaze still fixed on the screen. "There are properties listed here, too. Real estate holdings in your name. A commercial building downtown, a rental property near the university, and stocks. Dozens of companies, blue chips, startups that became giants." He finally looked up at Ethan, and there was something that resembled respect in his eyes. "Your grandfather built you an empire." The room was silent again, but this time the silence was different, imbued with a different quality. It wasn't the silence of mockery and condescension. It was the silence of realization, the silence of people who had recognized they had made a monumental, deeply embarrassing mistake. People who had scoffed at a boy in cheap sneakers, oblivious to the fact that they were laughing at someone who could buy and sell them 10 times over. The man in the charcoal suit stared at Ethan as if he'd just witnessed a ghost materialize before him. His face had transformed from smug superiority to ashen fear in a matter of seconds. The woman in the pearl necklace had her hand pressed against her mouth, her eyes wide with horror at the careless words she had uttered, at the petty judgments she had harbored. Ethan's legs felt weak and unsteady. He desperately wanted to sit down. He longed to call his mother and tell her the incredible news. But most of all, he wanted his grandfather back so he could ask him why he had done all of this, why he had kept it a secret. why he had allowed them to struggle when this unfathomable wealth had been lying dormant, waiting to be discovered. But his grandfather wasn't there anymore. He was gone. All that remained was the staggering number glowing on a screen and a room full of strangers who were regarding him with an entirely different expression than before. Mr. Donovan cleared his throat, breaking the strained silence. The professional mask had completely crumbled, revealing the genuinely shaken man beneath. Mr. Price, I sincerely apologize for my earlier tone. I had absolutely no idea who you were. If you'd like to sit down, we can discuss your account in detail. We have private offices for our platinum clients. We can. Ethan interrupted him quietly, his voice still tinged with disbelief. That's all right. My grandfather told me to come here, check the account, and then I'd understand. I think I understand now. What do you understand? Ms. Chun asked gently, her voice laced with genuine concern. Ethan's eyes welled with tears, but he resolutely blinked them back. He was still frightened, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of what had transpired. My mom and we didn't have much. He was always worried about what would happen to us, about me. He wanted to make sure I'd be okay, that we'd both be safe. He paused, his voice cracking with emotion. So he did this. He spent 10 years building something I didn't even know existed. His voice broke completely on the last word. The tears flowed freely then, hot and fast, and he made no attempt to stop them. He wasn't ashamed anymore. His grandfather had loved him enough to do this, to make these sacrifices, to save, to plan, to build a future for a boy who wore second-hand clothes and dared to dream small dreams because small dreams were all that had seemed possible. The room remained hushed, but the nature of their observation had transformed. They were no longer watching him as if he were an amusing spectacle, an anomaly in their meticulously curated world. They were watching him as a person, a human being grappling with an unimaginable revelation. Some averted their eyes in shame, unable to confront their own cruelty. Others shifted uncomfortably, forced to confront the callousness that had become an ingrained part of their privileged existence. The woman in the pearl necklace walked over slowly, hesitantly. She stood beside Ethan, not speaking at first, as if searching for the right words to convey her remorse. Then, very quietly, she said, "I'm sorry for what I said, for laughing. Your grandfather must have been an incredible man." Ethan wiped his eyes with the sleeve of his oversized jacket. "He was the best person I ever knew." She nodded slowly and walked away, her steps heavy, as if she were carrying the weight of her own hurtful words. Mr. Donovan placed a hand on the folder, carefully spreading the papers out on the counter. "There's more here. Legal documents, specific instructions from your grandfather. He left very specific guidance on how this account should be managed, what it's meant for, when you're allowed to access different portions of it." He looked at Ethan with a hint of kindness in his eyes. "He thought of everything." Ethan nodded slowly, absorbing the information. "Can I see the rest?" "Of course. But I should tell you there's a letter here, too. Sealed. It's addressed to you from him." Ethan's breath hitched in his throat. A letter. From his grandfather. Mr. Donovan retrieved an envelope, cream-colored and heavy, with Ethan's name written across the front in his grandfather's familiar handwriting. It was the same handwriting that used to grace his birthday cards and Christmas notes and the little messages left on the kitchen table. Ethan accepted the envelope with trembling hands. He didn't open it yet. He couldn't. Not here, not in front of all these people. "Can I take this home?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's yours, Mr. Price," Mr. Donovan said. "Everything here is yours. But before you go, there's something you should know." Ethan looked up at him, his heart pounding in his chest. "Your grandfather left instructions that you're not to access the full account until you're 18, but there's a monthly allowance set up for you and your mother. $20,000 a month, deposited automatically into a secondary account he opened in your mother's name. Starts today. $20,000 a month." Ethan's mother made less than that in 6 months. His mind couldn't even begin to process the enormity of the sum. It seemed unreal, impossible, like a fleeting dream he'd awaken from at any second. Why didn't he tell us? Ethan whispered, the question escaping before he could stop it. Why did he let us struggle? Miss Chun answered softly, her voice laced with empathy. There's a note in the file from him. He says he wanted you to understand the value of hard work, to grow up humble, to know what it meant to earn something before you inherited wealth. He didn't want money to define you. He wanted character to define you first. Ethan closed his eyes, and a wave of emotion washed over him. That sounded exactly like something his grandfather would say. He could almost hear his voice, rough and warm and filled with love. Behind him, people were quietly slipping away, leaving the Platinum Lounge. The atmosphere had shifted dramatically, the lightness and laughter replaced by a palpable sense of unease and introspection. Mr. Donovan extended his hand to Ethan. Mr. Price, it's an honor to serve your account. If you or your mother need anything at all, you call me directly. He handed Ethan a business card with gold lettering. And again, I apologize for how I treated you when you first arrived. I was wrong. Ethan shook his hand, surprised by the man's earnestness. It's okay. You didn't know. I should have treated you with respect regardless, Mr. Donovan said firmly. That's a lesson I won't soon forget. Ethan carefully tucked the envelope into his backpack along with the folder and the business card. He turned and walked towards the massive glass doors, his legs still trembling slightly, his heart still pounding in his chest. As he moved, he could feel the eyes of the room upon him, but they no longer felt mocking or amused. They simply watched, acknowledging him for who he truly was. He pushed through the doors and stepped out into the cool evening air. The city stretched out before him, a million lights beginning to flicker on as the sun dipped behind the towering skyscrapers. Everything looked exactly as it had an hour ago. The same streets, the same buildings, the same world. Yet, everything had changed irrevocably. Ethan reached into his backpack and withdrew the envelope. His fingers traced the familiar loops and curves of his grandfather's handwriting. He wasn't ready to open it yet, but he knew he would be soon. And when he did, he knew his grandfather would guide him, just as he always had. He felt tears welling in his eyes once more, but this time they weren't solely tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude, tears of overwhelming emotion, tears that whispered, "Thank you, and I miss you, and I promise I'll make you proud all at once." Ethan descended the steps of the Sterling Heights Financial Center, a 10-year-old boy carrying a fortune of $47 million, and a letter from the one person who had always believed he could achieve extraordinary things. And somewhere, in a place beyond marble floors and crystal chandeliers, beyond laughter and judgment and numbers on a screen, Robert Price was smiling. His grandson had kept his promise. He had come to the tower. He had checked the balance. And now, finally, he understood. The apartment building where Ethan lived with his mother was a stark contrast to the opulence of the Sterling Heights Financial Center. There were no marble floors here, no crystal chandeliers, no golden lights reflecting off polished granite. The elevator worked sporadically, if at all, and the hallway on the third floor carried the lingering aroma of someone's long-ago dinner, mixed with the musty scent of old carpet and a cleaning solution that never quite lived up to its name. The paint on the walls was peeling in places, revealing layers of different colors underneath, as if the building itself was trying to recall a faded memory of its former glory before time and neglect had left their mark. But this was home. This was where Ethan had lived his entire life, where his mother worked tirelessly to provide for him, managing to make him feel like the most cherished person in the world. This was where his grandfather used to visit every Sunday, bringing stories, wisdom, and a smile that made anything seem possible. Ethan paused outside apartment 3F, his hand hovering over the doorknob. The envelope from his grandfather nestled safely inside his jacket, pressed against his chest. He could hear the faint, familiar sound of the television seeping through the door. One of those game shows his mom loved to watch to unwind after her grueling shifts at the diner. She worked as a waitress 6 days a week, sometimes even 7 when they desperately needed the extra income. Her feet ached every night, the pain etched into the lines of her face. She never complained, but Ethan saw the way she winced as she kicked off her shoes, the way she massaged her weary ankles while watching television, the way she often drifted off to sleep on the couch before she even made it to her bedroom. She was only 32 years old, but sometimes she looked much older, her youthful vitality prematurely diminished by a life that had demanded far more than it had ever given back. Ethan turned the doorknob and stepped inside. The apartment was small, comprising just 2 bedrooms, a cramped bathroom, a tiny kitchen barely big enough to turn around in, and a living room that had to serve double duty as a dining room, a storage area, and everything else they needed it to be. Yet, despite its limitations, his mother had transformed it into a haven, a place filled with love and warmth. The walls were adorned with family photos and mismatched frames, alongside drawings Ethan had created back in elementary school. Drawings she stubbornly refused to take down, even though he begged her to, because they were, in his adolescent mind, incredibly embarrassing. A soft, worn blanket, the Afghan, knitted by his grandmother before she passed away and still faintly scented with lavender, lay draped across the couch. Love permeated the small apartment, a richer presence than any material wealth could provide. His mother, Catherine Price, looked up from the couch as he entered. Her dark hair was pulled back into a ponytail, but unruly strands had escaped to frame her tired face. She was still wearing her waitress uniform, a simple pink dress with a white apron marred by a stubborn coffee stain near the pocket, a testament to a long and hectic day. Her eyes were weary, yet they sparked with immediate, familiar warmth when she saw him, as though he were the most brilliant sunrise she'd seen all day. "Hey, sweetheart," she said, her voice thick with affection. "How was your day? Did you make it to the library like you planned?" Ethan stood frozen in the doorway, his backpack heavy on his shoulders, heavier than it had ever felt before. He struggled to find the words he needed. How did you tell your mother that everything she'd been striving for, every sacrifice she'd willingly made, every hardship she had endured for the past decade, was, in a way, now irrelevant? How did you explain that the landscape of their lives had been irrevocably changed, that nothing would ever be quite the same? "Mom," he said quietly, his voice betraying a slight tremor. "We need to talk." Her smile flickered momentarily. She straightened up on the couch, reaching for the remote to mute the blaring television. "What's wrong, honey? Did something happen at school? Are you okay?" "I'm okay," he said quickly, trying to assuage her immediate fears. "But I need to tell you something important, and I need you to sit down properly." "I am sitting down," she said, her voice now edged with worry. "Ethan, you're scaring me. What happened?" He walked over and sat beside her on the worn couch, gently placing his backpack on the floor between his feet. He slowly unzipped the bag and retrieved the manila folder, the one containing all the documents, the bewildering account numbers, the daunting legal papers, and the crisp business card from Mr. Donovan. He placed it carefully in her lap. "I went to Sterling Heights Financial Center today," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "Grandpa told me to go there when I turned 10. He said I had an account there. He made me promise I'd check it." Catherine's face visibly paled. She stared down at the folder as if it were a venomous snake coiled and ready to strike. "Ethan, what are you talking about? Your grandfather never mentioned any account to me. And Sterling Heights, that's for rich people. Why on earth would he send you there?" "I didn't understand either," Ethan said. "But he left me instructions. He left me a lot of things, Mom." She opened the folder with trembling hands. Her eyes darted across the first page, scanning quickly at first, then slowing down, then stopping altogether, completely fixated on a particular sentence. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound escaped her lips. She turned to the second page, then the third. Her hands began to shake so violently that she nearly dropped the folder altogether. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice cracking with disbelief. "What is this? This says $47 million. That can't be real. There's got to be some kind of mistake." "It's not a mistake," Ethan said softly, his voice gaining a newfound sense of conviction. "I checked. They checked. 3 different people checked. It's real, Mom. Grandpa opened an account for me when I was born. He put money in it every month. He invested it wisely. He made it grow. And now it's mine. It's ours. Catherine covered her mouth with her hand, stifling a sob that threatened to erupt. Tears streamed down her cheeks, blurring the stark words on the papers in her lap. She shook her head back and forth as if trying to deny the reality of what she was seeing, desperately attempting to rewrite the narrative, because if it were true, it would mean that her father had been secretly amassing this unimaginable fortune the whole time, while she had been toiling away, working herself to the point of exhaustion, while they had been scraping by on meager tips and hard-earned overtime, while she had gone to bed every single night haunted by the same terrifying question. Would they have enough for rent, for groceries, for keeping the damn lights on? A strangled gasp escaped her lips. Why didn't he tell me? Why did he let me work myself to the bone like this? Why did he let us struggle, living on the edge every single month? Ethan quietly slid the weathered envelope across the worn table, the one bearing his name scrawled in his grandfather's familiar, if shaky, hand. There's a letter inside. I haven't opened it. I wanted to wait to share this with you. Maybe they were both seeing each other differently now, viewing their lives through a new lens, envisioning a future filled with hope that they had long since abandoned. After dinner, Ethan helped with the dishes, his quiet presence a comforting offering of companionship and support. His mother stood beside him at the sink, her hands immersed in the warm, soapy water, and she spoke softly, her voice barely audible. We're going to be okay, aren't we, Ethan? Yeah, Mom, Ethan replied, his voice filled with unwavering conviction. We're going to be okay. And for the first time in what felt like his entire life, he truly believed it. 3 months passed in a blur, a dream they desperately hoped wouldn't end, a surreal tapestry woven from newfound possibilities and lingering disbelief. It was the kind of dream where you kept expecting to wake up, bracing yourself for the harsh return to reality, but morning never came, and reality stubbornly insisted that impossible things were, in fact, entirely possible. Catherine had quit her job at the diner 2 weeks after that fateful evening when Ethan came home with a folder full of documents that irrevocably changed their lives. Her boss, Mr. Henderson, a man who had exploited her loyalty for 7 years, working her 6 days a week without ever giving her a single raise, actually had the audacity to look offended when she handed in her notice, her resignation a long overdue act of liberation. He mumbled something about loyalty and reliability and how difficult it would be to replace her, as if her tireless efforts had been nothing more than a mere inconvenience. Catherine simply smiled politely, a serene expression gracing her features, and walked out the door without looking back, her heart soaring with a sense of freedom she had never experienced before. The feeling of breaking free from those shackles felt far better than any amount of money ever could. The apartment remained the same, a familiar anchor in a sea of change. They hadn't moved, hadn't succumbed to the urge to immediately relocate to a more lavish setting. Catherine insisted they stay, at least for now, at least until they had fully processed the implications of this new chapter, until they had figured out what this radically altered life actually meant. The elevator still only worked sporadically, a persistent reminder of their humble beginnings. The paint was still peeling, a testament to years of neglect. But Catherine had new shoes now, comfortable ones that didn't make her wince with every step, shoes that cradled her feet with a gentle embrace. She slept soundly in her own bed instead of collapsing on the couch, her body finally surrendering to the restorative power of true rest. She smiled more freely, her laughter echoing through the apartment with a lightness that had been absent for far too long. The lines around her eyes, the ones that had been etched deep by exhaustion and worry, were slowly starting to soften, revealing the vibrant spirit that had been hidden beneath years of relentless hardship. Ethan had dutifully returned to school the Monday after the life-altering visit to Sterling Heights, and he had diligently kept his mouth shut about everything, adhering to his grandfather's explicit instructions. That was, without a doubt, one of the hardest things he had ever done, an exercise in self-restraint that tested the very limits of his patience. His best friend, Marcus Chen, kept peppering him with questions, relentlessly probing him about why he seemed different, why he looked like he was carrying some immense secret, why there was an uncharacteristic air of quiet contemplation about him. Ethan just shrugged and offered vague assurances, saying that everything was fine, avoiding any details that might betray the truth. Another kid in his class, Tyler Brooks, had recently acquired a new smartphone and wouldn't stop bragging about it, showing it off like it was the most extraordinary creation in the history of mankind. Its sleek design and advanced features the ultimate symbol of status and success. Ethan had to bite his tongue to keep from blurting out that he could buy 1,000 of those phones and it wouldn't even make a dent in his account. A reckless display of wealth that would undoubtedly attract the wrong kind of attention. But his grandfather's cautionary words echoed in his head constantly. A constant reminder of the need for discretion. Asterisk, don't tell anyone about this wealth. Wealth attracts the wrong kind of attention. Asterisk, so he stayed quiet, playing the role of the unassuming, ordinary kid he had always been. He wore the same clothes, ate the same packed lunch, and acted like nothing had changed, even though everything had been irrevocably transformed. But today was different. A day that marked a significant step towards embracing their new reality. Today was the day Catherine had insisted they fulfill a specific request that his grandfather had meticulously outlined in another document they'd unearthed, buried deep within the folder. A document boldly titled, "When You're Ready." Inside were detailed instructions for scheduling a meeting with his grandfather's lawyer, a man named Gerald Whitmore, who had apparently been discreetly handling the account and overseeing the investments for years without ever actually meeting Ethan. A testament to his unwavering loyalty and commitment to maintaining the family's privacy. The appointment was scheduled for 2 p.m. at a prestigious law office located in the heart of downtown, housed within a building that looked as if it had been standing since before the advent of computers, its imposing facade a testament to a bygone era. The building was all old brick and narrow, imposing windows and a dimly lit lobby that smelled faintly of leather and old paper, an atmosphere of timeless elegance and quiet authority. Catherine and Ethan walked into the building together, their footsteps echoing softly on the polished marble floor, and this time Catherine was the one carrying the heavy folder, her grip firm and her shoulders squared with newfound confidence. She had dressed up for the occasion, carefully selecting a navy blue dress she'd purchased from a thrift store years ago, a dress she had always admired but had never found an occasion special enough to warrant wearing it. Ethan wore his usual school clothes, jeans and a comfortable sweater his mother had bought him last Christmas, an ensemble that reflected his understated style and his unwavering commitment to remaining true to himself. They still didn't outwardly appear like wealthy individuals, didn't exude the ostentatious display of wealth that characterized the city's elite. They didn't carry themselves with the kind of arrogance that often accompanied privilege. But Catherine walked with her head held higher now, her posture radiating a quiet confidence that hadn't been there 3 months ago, a subtle shift that made all the difference. The receptionist, a woman with a kind smile and a neatly coiffed hairstyle, directed them to the 3rd floor, to an office located at the end of a long, hushed hallway lined with portraits of serious-looking men in suits, portraits that seemed to exude an air of judgment, their stern gazes scrutinizing everyone who dared to walk past them. The door at the end of the hallway had a small, elegant gold nameplate that read, "Gerald Whitmore, Attorney at Law." Catherine knocked twice, her knuckles rapping softly against the polished wood. "Come in," called a warm, resonant voice from within. They entered an office that looked exactly like what Ethan imagined a lawyer's office should look like, a stereotypical depiction of legal formality. Dark wood paneling lined the walls, creating an atmosphere of timeless elegance. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves crammed with thick, leather-bound legal volumes that probably weighed more than he did, their spines displaying a collection of arcane titles and complex legal jargon. A massive, imposing desk dominated the center of the room, its surface covered in neat stacks of papers, organized with meticulous precision. And behind that desk sat a man who appeared to be in his late 60s, his white hair neatly combed, his sharp blue eyes peering out from behind wire-rimmed glasses, his face etched with the lines of wisdom and experience, a countenance that seemed kind and approachable despite its serious expression. He stood as they entered, moving from behind the desk with an effortless grace, his hand extended in a gesture of welcome. "Mrs. Price, and you must be Ethan," he said warmly, his voice resonating with sincerity as he shook both their hands, his grip firm and reassuring. "Please sit down. I've been waiting for this meeting for 10 years. They settled into 2 plush leather chairs that were so incredibly comfortable. Ethan immediately understood why rich people liked expensive furniture. the sheer indulgence of sinking into such luxurious comfort a tangible reward for their success. Mr. Whitmore returned to his seat and folded his hands on the desk, his gaze encompassing them both, his expression reflecting something that might have been fondness, or perhaps simply professional courtesy. Ethan couldn't quite discern which, the lawyer's demeanor a carefully constructed facade of impartiality. "First, let me say how deeply sorry I am about Robert's passing," Mr. Whitmore began, his voice filled with genuine sorrow. "He was not only a client, but a friend, a good man, one of the best I ever knew." "Thank you," Catherine said quietly, her voice tinged with sadness. "He spoke highly of you as well. I found notes he'd written mentioning how much he trusted you." Mr. Whitmore smiled slightly, a subtle crinkling around his eyes. "That trust was mutual, Mrs. Price. Robert came to me 11 years ago with a plan, a vision he wanted to bring to fruition. He wanted to build something lasting for his grandson, something that would provide him with security and opportunity without spoiling him, without robbing him of the chance to develop his own character. He was very specific about how it should be done, about the intricate steps that needed to be taken." Mr. Whitmore continued, his voice tinged with admiration. "We met every month to review the investments, adjust the strategy, make sure everything was growing the way he wanted it to. He was meticulous, brilliant, a true visionary. Actually, some of the investment choices he made, I would have never recommended, they seemed far too risky, but he possessed an uncanny instinct, a keen sense of market trends that I've rarely seen in my career. And he was almost always right." Ethan leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. Did he know how big it would get? Did he ever imagine that it would reach this scale? "He hoped," Mr. Whitmore said, his gaze distant, lost in memories of his longtime friend and client. "But I don't think even he anticipated it would grow to $47 million. He was initially aiming for 10, maybe 15 million if everything went perfectly, if all the stars aligned. But the market cooperated, his choices paid off far better than anyone expected, and here we are." He reached into a drawer and pulled out a thick folder, placing it carefully on the desk. "This contains everything," he announced, his voice solemn. "A full accounting of every investment, every property, every asset. But more importantly, it contains Robert's wishes for how this wealth should be managed and eventually used, his deeply held convictions for how this legacy should be honored." Catherine and Ethan exchanged glances, their minds reeling from the sheer magnitude of it all. "We found some instructions," Catherine said, gesturing towards the folder she had brought with them. "In the folder at the bank." "Those were the basic guidelines, the preliminary steps," Mr. Whitmore confirmed. "This is far more detailed, far more comprehensive. Robert spent the last 2 years of his life writing this, meticulously crafting every detail. He wanted to ensure that Ethan understood not just what he had, but why he had it and what it was ultimately meant for." He opened the folder and pulled out a bound document, perhaps 50 pages thick, its cover embossed with a simple, elegant design. "This is essentially a manual, a guidebook, a comprehensive framework for navigating this unique situation. Robert affectionately called it the foundation of a good life. He wrote it specifically for you, Ethan, as a personal testament to his love and his enduring belief in your potential." Ethan's throat tightened with emotion, the weight of his grandfather's legacy settling upon him, a profound responsibility he was determined to uphold. His grandfather had spent 2 years writing him a book, pouring his heart and soul into this written testament. 2 years planning, thinking, meticulously preparing for a future he wouldn't be a part of, investing his time and energy into shaping the destiny of his grandson. The weight of that love felt both crushing and profoundly beautiful, a burden he was honored to bear. Mr. Whitmore gently slid the document across the desk, his eyes filled with compassion. "I won't ask you to read it here, Ethan. Take it home, study it at your own pace, absorb its wisdom. But I can summarize some of the key points, offer you a glimpse into the overarching themes. First and foremost, Robert established a trust that you can't fully access until you're 25, not 18, Mr. Whitmore explained, his voice measured and deliberate. He believed 18 was far too young, that most people don't develop the kind of wisdom and maturity necessary to manage such a significant amount of wealth until their mid-20s, when they've had more time to experience the world and cultivate a stronger sense of self. Until then, Mr. Whitmore continued, you have the monthly allowance for you and your mother, a generous sum designed to provide you with financial security and alleviate the burden of financial worry. And you also have access to additional funds specifically earmarked for education, medical expenses, and what Robert affectionately called character-building experiences, which include opportunities for travel, volunteering, and enriching learning experiences that will broaden your horizons and shape your perspective. What happens at 25? Ethan asked, his curiosity piqued. At 25, you gain full control of the trust, Ethan, Mr. Whitmore explained. But Robert included recommendations, not strict requirements, for how he hoped you'd ultimately use the wealth. He wanted you to seriously consider starting a foundation, dedicating a portion of the funds to helping others, specifically those in situations similar to what you and your mother experienced. Single parents struggling to make ends meet, kids who need access to opportunities they can't otherwise afford. He firmly believed that wealth should circulate, should be used to do good, should lift people up rather than simply sitting stagnant in an account, growing larger and serving no real purpose. Catherine's eyes filled with tears, her voice choked with emotion. That sounds exactly like him. That's precisely the kind of person he was, always thinking of others, always willing to lend a helping hand. There's more, Mr. Whitmore continued, his voice unwavering. Robert also set aside specific amounts for certain purposes, each carefully considered and imbued with his values. $1 million is specifically designated for your college education, wherever you choose to go, whatever field of study you choose to pursue. He wanted you to have the freedom to explore your passions and reach your full potential, without the constraints of financial limitations. Another $1 million is set aside for what he called your mother's dreams, Mr. Whitmore announced, turning his gaze towards Catherine. Catherine, he wanted you to have the freedom to pursue whatever aspirations you'd long given up in order to raise Ethan, to nurture his growth and well-being. Whether that's furthering your own education, starting a business, traveling the world, or simply pursuing whatever brings you joy and fulfillment, he wanted you to have the resources to make those dreams a reality. Catherine covered her mouth with her hand, her entire being overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of his generosity, her emotions a swirling vortex of disbelief, gratitude, and profound love. I don't even know what my dreams are anymore, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I stopped dreaming a long time ago. Then you have the time to remember, Catherine, Mr. Whitmore said gently, his voice laced with compassion. Or perhaps to discover entirely new ones, to embark on a journey of self-discovery and uncover passions you never knew you possessed. That's what Robert wanted for both of you, to have the time and the freedom and the options to create a life filled with purpose and meaning. Ethan picked up the bound document, feeling the weight of it in his hands, the physical embodiment of his grandfather's thoughts, his wisdom, his enduring hopes for his grandson's future. It felt sacred, a tangible representation of a love that transcended time and death. Can I ask you something, Mr. Whitmore? Ethan asked, his voice tinged with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Of course, Ethan. Why did he do it this way? Why all the secrecy? Why all the elaborate measures? Why make my mom work so hard, struggling day in and day out, when he could have helped us the whole time, alleviating our burdens? Mr. Whitmore leaned back in his chair, considering the question carefully, his gaze thoughtful. I asked him that same question many times, Ethan. Every time I witnessed how hard your mother was working, how tirelessly she sacrificed, I would urge Robert to help her more directly, to provide her with immediate relief. But he always said the same thing, his resolve unwavering. He said that struggle builds character in a way that comfort never can, Mr. Whitmore explained, his voice echoing Robert's deeply held convictions. He believed that if you grew up watching your mother sacrifice for you, witnessing her unwavering devotion, you develop a profound understanding of the value of hard work, of perseverance in the face of adversity, of a love that costs something, a love that demands sacrifice. He believed that understanding would ultimately make you a better man than money ever could, a person of substance and integrity, grounded in humility and compassion. Mr. Whitmore continued, his gaze locking with Ethan's, his words imbued with the weight of Robert's wisdom. And he firmly believed that if he simply gave your mother everything, if he shielded her from all hardship, she'd never develop the inner strength and unwavering resilience that he knew she'd need to guide you through life, to weather whatever storms life might throw your way. He paused, his gaze shifting to Catherine, his eyes filled with admiration. He didn't make you work because he didn't care, Mrs. Price. He made you work because he cared so deeply, so profoundly, that he was willing to be perceived as the villain in your story if it meant his grandson would. Grow up right? Catherine choked out, the dam finally breaking as tears streamed freely down her face. The revelation of Robert's carefully orchestrated plan, born of love but laced with agonizing decisions, had hit her with the force of a tidal wave. I was so angry at him, livid even, when I first found out. Part of me still wrestles with it, that initial gut reaction of betrayal. But then I look at Ethan, at the fine young man he's becoming, and I see what my father saw. I see the wisdom, the agonizing love, behind why he did it this way. He knew you'd be angry, Ethan. He knew it would sting. Mr. Whitmore, the estate lawyer, a man whose face seemed permanently etched with the gravitas of legal documents and weighty decisions, added, he wrote about it, Catherine. He poured out his heart on paper, trying to articulate the impossible. He said it was the hardest thing he ever did, watching you both struggle, knowing he could alleviate the burden with a mere signature, and yet not intervening as much as his heart demanded. But he believed in both of you. He believed you were inherently strong, resilient, capable of navigating the storm. And he believed that Ethan, by witnessing your strength, would emerge even better, even more compassionate. They sat in a heavy silence, the weight of Robert's words hanging in the air like a palpable presence. Outside the large window, the relentless city moved on, oblivious. Yellow cabs screamed through intersections, hurried footsteps echoed on the pavement, and office workers, glued to their phones, rushed to appointments, demanding jobs and intricate lives that had absolutely nothing to do with this hushed, elegant office where a grandfather's profound love was being translated into the cold, hard language of legal terms, complex investment strategies, and formally bound documents. It was a stark contrast, the chaotic vibrancy outside and the quiet intimacy within. Mr. Whitmore, with the practiced movements of a seasoned professional, carefully pulled out another paper from the pristine folder. There's one more thing, a final directive. Robert left specific instructions for today's meeting. He insisted that I give you this after we discussed everything else, after the full picture had emerged. He carefully handed Ethan a sealed envelope. It was smaller than the bank's official correspondence, but crafted from the same heavy, creamy-colored paper stock, hinting at the personal touch within. Ethan took it with reverence, his fingers tracing the familiar loops and swirls of his grandfather's handwriting. His name was boldly written on the front, a direct address from beyond the grave. But underneath his name was a date, carefully inscribed. Open on the day you meet with Gerald Whitmore, 3 months after you found the account. Catherine whispered, her voice thick with emotion. He timed it. Ethan. He meticulously planned every step. A realization dawned in her eyes. He knew exactly when we'd be ready, emotionally and mentally, for whatever's in there. Ethan looked at his mother, seeking reassurance, a silent question passing between them. She nodded, a subtle but firm gesture of encouragement. Go ahead, sweetheart. With a deep breath, Ethan carefully opened the envelope, breaking the seal that represented a final, intimate connection to his grandfather. He pulled out a single page, handwritten in Robert's distinctive script. The ink was slightly faded in places, a testament to the letter's journey through time, like it had been written, read, rewritten, and meticulously perfected over countless hours. Dear Ethan, he read aloud, his voice wavering slightly, betraying the emotional turbulence churning within him. If you're reading this with Mr. Whitmore, then 3 months have passed since you discovered the account. 3 months of adjustment, of processing the shock, of beginning to understand the implications of what this means for you and your mother. I sincerely hope these months have been kind to both of you. I hope you're starting to see the vast possibilities that lie before you instead of just feeling utterly overwhelmed by the sheer weight of it all. By now, you've probably realized that money, in and of itself, doesn't solve every problem life throws your way. It doesn't magically bring back the people we've lost, the cherished souls who now exist only in our memories. It doesn't erase pain, or grief, or the gnawing sense of loneliness that can creep into the quiet moments. What it does do, however, is remove certain barriers, those relentless obstacles that prevent you from pursuing your dreams. It buys you the precious gift of time. It gives you a wider range of options, expanding your horizons beyond what you ever thought possible. And most importantly, it gives you the ability to focus on what truly matters in life instead of constantly worrying about basic survival. I want you to use that gift wisely, Ethan. I implore you to remember that the most important things in life, they aren't tangible objects, those fleeting possessions that society often pressures us to believe define success. What truly matters are the people in your life, the quality of your relationships, the shared experiences you create together, and those precious moments of genuine connection, unwavering love, and profound personal growth. Now, money can certainly help facilitate those things. It can smooth the path, so to speak, but it can't magically conjure them out of thin air. You, Ethan, it's up to you to actively create them, nurture them with care, and cherish them deeply. You and your mother share something truly extraordinary, a bond forged in the crucible of hardship, a living testament to your enduring love and resilience. Never allow money to weaken that bond. Don't let it drive a wedge between you, and never let it change the way you treat each other. Instead, use it to strengthen what you already have, to amplify the love and support that already exists between you. Now, I have a special challenge for you, Ethan. Something very specific I want you to do within the next year. Take $10,000 from your allowance. Consider it seed money for a grand experiment in compassion. Use it to help someone who doesn't expect it, someone who desperately needs it but would never, under any circumstances, ask for it. Don't do it for recognition, don't seek praise or gratitude, and don't breathe a word of it to anyone. Simply do it because it's the right thing to do, because you're now in a position to help, and because you inherently understand what it feels like to be vulnerable and in need of assistance. And after you've done that, I want you to write down in detail how it made you feel. Not how it made the other person feel, not their external reaction, but the internal transformation, the shift within your own heart. Because that's the real lesson, Ethan. Giving isn't ultimately about the receiver. It's about who we become when we consciously choose to give, when we actively cultivate empathy and compassion within ourselves. I love you, Ethan. I'm immensely proud of you. Not because of any newfound wealth, not because of any external achievements, but simply because of the person you are at your core. You're inherently kind. You're exceptionally thoughtful. You have your mother's unwavering heart and your grandmother's profound wisdom. Money will never change those inherent qualities unless you allow it to. So don't let it. Stay true to yourself, Ethan. Just do it with better shoes and a fuller refrigerator. All my love, always, Grandpa. Ethan's tears betrayed him, splashing onto the letter and blurring the ink of a single, poignant word. He quickly wiped his eyes, desperate not to damage the precious letter, this final, heartfelt message from his grandfather. Catherine was openly crying, her hand reaching across the polished table to squeeze his, a silent offering of comfort and shared grief. Mr. Whitmore, the stoic lawyer, pulled out a crisp, white handkerchief and discreetly dabbed at his own eyes, a rare glimpse of the human being beneath the professional facade. Robert made me promise, practically under oath, not to read that letter before giving it to you, Mr. Whitmore confessed, his voice roughened with emotion. But now I see so clearly why he wrote it. He was teaching you one more lesson, Ethan, perhaps the most important one of all. What lesson? Ethan asked, his voice barely a whisper, still choked with emotion. That wealth isn't merely a privilege, a golden ticket to a life of ease and indulgence, Mr. Whitmore explained, leaning forward intently. It's an enormous responsibility. That having more inherently means you should do more, be more, give more. Most people, unfortunately, never learn that. They accumulate and hoard and fiercely protect what they have, clinging to it as if it were the very source of their being. Robert wanted you to understand, from the very beginning, that money is meant to flow, to move, to actively do good in the world, to alleviate suffering and create opportunities for others. Catherine, her voice steadier now as the initial shock began to subside, spoke up. Mr. Whitmore, in your professional opinion, knowing everything you know about this account and about my father's intentions, what should we do? How should we responsibly handle this incredible turn of events? Mr. Whitmore offered a warm, reassuring smile, a genuine expression that reached his usually serious eyes. The same thing you've been doing for the past 3 months, Catherine. Live your life. Let Ethan finish growing up. Let him navigate adolescence and discover his passions without the undue burden of immense wealth altering his trajectory. Don't make any rash, major decisions right now, fueled by excitement or a misguided sense of obligation. Don't buy a mansion or a fleet of sports cars, or suddenly try to live like stereotypical millionaires. Those material things can wait. What can't wait is Ethan's education, his personal development, his profound understanding of what this all truly means, the weight and responsibility that comes with it. Read the guidebook Robert wrote, study it diligently, and follow his suggestions. And most importantly, stay grounded. Stay connected to the people and values that have made you who you are, the foundations upon which your lives have been built. Ethan looked down at the letter still clutched in his hands, at his grandfather's final challenge, etched in faded ink. Help someone who doesn't expect it, someone who needs it but would never ask. An idea was already forming in his mind, a seed of compassion that had been planted ever since he first walked out of Sterling Heights Financial Center 3 months ago, overwhelmed but also strangely determined. Can I ask you both for some advice about something? Ethan said, his voice gaining confidence. Of course, Ethan, Mr. Whitmore replied, his gaze encouraging. There's a kid at my school. His name is Jordan Davis. His mom is a single parent like mine was, and she works 2 jobs just to make ends meet. Jordan often comes to school exhausted. His shoes have holes in them, big ones. He never has lunch money, so he usually just doesn't eat. I've been sharing my lunch with him since 3rd grade, but he always looks so embarrassed about it, like he's ashamed. Ethan paused, carefully choosing his words. I want to help him, his family, but I don't want him to feel bad about it. I don't want him to know it came directly from me, that I'm the one helping him. How do I do that? Mr. Whitmore and Catherine exchanged a knowing look, a silent conversation passing between them. The lawyer nodded slowly, approvingly, a hint of Robert's influence shining through Ethan's words. That's exactly the kind of thoughtful, selfless thinking your grandfather hoped you would develop, Ethan. And yes, there are absolutely ways to do it, ways to offer assistance without compromising someone's dignity. Anonymous donations, gift cards that mysteriously appear without explanation, scholarships awarded based on need rather than merit, Mr. Whitmore suggested, ticking off options on his fingers. There are also numerous organizations that are dedicated to helping families in need, and donations can be made in ways that protect everyone's privacy and dignity. We can work together, Ethan, to figure out the best, most effective, and most compassionate approach. But Catherine added, placing her hand firmly on Ethan's shoulder, offering a gentle counterpoint. We need to be careful, Ethan. We can't help everyone, no matter how much we might want to, and we need to make sure we're helping in ways that actually create lasting, positive change, not just superficially throwing money at problems, hoping they'll magically disappear. Your mother's absolutely right, Ethan, Mr. Whitmore agreed, his tone serious. Good intentions, while admirable, aren't always enough. You need wisdom, careful planning, and a deep understanding of the complexities of poverty and need. That's precisely why your grandfather wanted you to take time, to learn, to slowly grow into this incredible responsibility instead of having it all thrust upon you at once. They spent the next hour delving into the practical matters, the nuts and bolts of managing a substantial fortune. Bank accounts, complex investment strategies, labyrinthine tax implications, ironclad legal protections. Mr. Whitmore meticulously explained how the trust was structured, how the monthly allowance worked, what expenses could be responsibly covered, and what extravagant purchases were definitely off limits, at least for now. He provided them with contact information for trusted financial advisors, experienced accountants, and other professionals whom Robert had implicitly trusted throughout his life. He showed them documents and forms that seemed to be written in a foreign language to Ethan, dense with legal jargon and financial acronyms. But through it all, even as the legal and financial details swirled around him, Ethan's thoughts kept returning to his grandfather, to the quiet, unassuming man who had lived modestly, worked diligently, and planned meticulously, all so that his grandson would have opportunities he himself had never dreamed of. A man who understood that the greatest gift you could give someone wasn't simply money, but the inherent character, the moral compass, and the unwavering compassion to use that money wisely to create positive change in the world. When the meeting finally drew to a close, Mr. Whitmore walked them to the door, a gesture of respect and a subtle acknowledgement of the profound significance of the moment. "Ethan," he said, his voice softening, "your grandfather asked me to tell you one more thing, a final thought when we met before he passed. He said to tell you that wealth is like water. If you dam it up and keep it for yourself, hoarding it and refusing to share it, it stagnates and becomes useless, a breeding ground for resentment and bitterness. But if you let it flow freely, if you share it generously and use it thoughtfully to nourish the world around you, it creates life everywhere it goes, fostering growth, opportunity, and hope. He wanted you to be a river, Ethan, not a dam." Ethan nodded, committing those words to memory, etching them alongside everything else his grandfather had taught him, lessons that were now more valuable than ever. They left the hushed law office and walked back through the opulent lobby, past the imposing portraits of serious men who seemed to disapprove of frivolity, past the cheerful receptionist who smiled at them without knowing she was smiling at a 10-year-old millionaire and his mother, who finally, after years of relentless struggle, didn't have to work herself to the point of exhaustion anymore. They stepped out onto the bustling street, where the afternoon sun was warm on their faces, and the city was vibrantly alive with movement and endless possibility. Catherine stopped on the sidewalk and looked down at Ethan, her eyes filled with a mixture of love, relief, and a touch of lingering disbelief. "You know what we should do, Ethan? Right now?" she asked, a playful glint in her eyes. "Let's go get ice cream. The good kind, from that ridiculously expensive place downtown that makes it fresh every single day. The kind we could only dream about before." Ethan grinned, his face lighting up with genuine joy. "Can we actually afford it now, Mom?" Catherine laughed, a full-throated, unrestrained laugh that seemed to bubble up from deep within her soul, a sound that truly sounded like freedom. "Yeah, sweetheart. I think after all this we can definitely afford it." They walked together toward the ice cream shop, hand in hand, a mother and son united by love and a shared journey through hardship. As they walked, Ethan thought about everything that had happened since that fateful evening 3 months ago, when he had hesitantly walked into Sterling Heights Financial Center with nothing but a cryptic promise to his beloved grandfather. He thought about Mr. Donovan's stunned face when he saw the account balance, the disbelief and then grudging respect that had flickered across his features. He thought about his mother crying, those raw, cathartic tears that had washed away years of accumulated stress and worry as she read his grandfather's letters. He thought about the guidebook now nestled safely in his backpack, 50 pages of meticulously crafted wisdom waiting to be absorbed, each sentence a pearl of insight into the complexities of wealth and responsibility. He thought about Jordan Davis and the holes in his worn-out shoes, and how profoundly good it would feel to help without seeking recognition, to alleviate someone's suffering without expecting anything in return. Most of all, he thought about his grandfather, Robert Price, now somewhere beyond reach, beyond the limitations of earthly existence, but somehow still vibrantly present in every dollar, every carefully considered instruction, every meticulously crafted plan that he had left behind. Robert Price had spent the last years of his life building something that would outlast him, something that would protect, guide, and teach long after his voice had gone silent, a legacy of love and generosity that would continue to ripple through the world. And standing there on a sunny street corner, waiting for the light to change so they could cross and finally get that ridiculously expensive ice cream, Ethan made a solemn promise, not just to his grandfather this time, but to himself, a vow etched in his heart. He promised he would honor this extraordinary gift. He would diligently learn everything there was to learn about managing wealth wisely, with prudence and compassion. He would help people, truly help them, in the way his grandfather had always helped him, with unwavering kindness and quiet generosity. He would stay humble and kind and eternally grateful, no matter how many zeros appeared in his bank account balance. He would be a river, not a dam, a conduit for goodness and positive change. The light changed from red to green, a silent signal to move forward. Catherine took his hand, her touch reassuring, and they crossed the street together, a mother and son who had survived hardship, who had found unexpected abundance, and who were now learning, one day at a time, what it truly meant to have both struggle and success intricately woven into their shared story. Behind them, the imposing law office grew smaller and smaller, receding into the background. Ahead of them, the brightly colored ice cream shop beckoned, its cheerful awning a promise of sweet delights, and the irresistible smell of freshly baked waffle cones drifting enticingly through the open door. And somewhere in a place beyond buildings and streets and bank accounts, beyond the limitations of mortal existence, Robert Price was smiling, a peaceful, knowing smile, because his grandson had kept every promise, had walked into that towering building with unwavering courage, had checked the balance with a steady hand, had understood the profound lesson, and now, most importantly, was learning to live not as someone defined by wealth, but as someone who would use wealth to actively define goodness in the world, to create a legacy of compassion and positive change that would ripple through generations. The 10-year-old boy who had once walked into a room full of millionaires and been dismissed with laughter was now walking confidently into his future with his head held high, his heart overflowing with gratitude, and his grandfather's enduring wisdom lighting the way forward. And that, Robert knew, was worth more than $47 million could ever buy. Thank you for watching this story through to the end. If it touched your heart, if it reminded you that true wealth lies not in material possessions but in the strength of our character, if it made you think about the people in your life who have selflessly sacrificed for you, please subscribe to this channel to support our growth. We share stories that matter, stories that challenge perspectives, stories that remind us what it truly means to be human, to be connected, to be compassionate. Drop a comment below and share what this story meant to you, what resonated most deeply within your soul, and share it with someone who needs to hear it, someone who needs a reminder of the power of kindness and the importance of giving back. Until next time, remember, be a river, not a dam. Let goodness flow freely through you and into the world. The end.